The president made some promises. One of them was there weren't going to be any tax increases if you made less than $250,000. And that, from a show-me guy from Missouri, that's puzzling, that promise. Here's another promise. He promised transparency. He says, I will not sign any non-emergency bill without giving the American public an opportunity to review and comment on the White House website for at least 5 days. So we're going to have some transparency here. Now, I wonder how much transparency there was in that budget you're talking about that says we're just going to assume it's going to contract 1%, when this quarter it's already contracted 6%, and it was 6% the other quarter. What kind of numbers are those? I yield.
Well, they're bad numbers, and I think that's why it was rushed through Congress, so that people couldn't ask those questions. But the truth of the matter is, the result of that, of cooking the books with rosy numbers that don't exist, that no one agrees with, is that we will face close to a $2 trillion deficit just this year. And trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see. And so when Judge Carter said, we may not see another balanced budget in our lifetime, that's no exaggeration. We may not see a balanced budget in our lifetime. And before I yield back to you, let me make one correction that I hear. I guess if you repeat something often enough, people believe it. But you often hear up here Democrats who say, we gave President Clinton a surplus, or President Clinton gave President Bush a surplus, and President Obama inherited a huge deficit. It's awfully misleading. Truth of the matter is, the surplus that was given to President Bush wasn't created by Democrats in Congress, but by Republicans in Congress, who sat down with President Clinton and said, we are going to balance this budget. And I was here on a night like this night, where we passed the balanced budget agreement, and guess who voted against it? Democrats. And then, when you talk about the deficit President Obama inherited, that didn't come from Republicans.
Reclaim my time. So let me just summarize, see if I got what you said. What you're saying is, we kept hearing from the Democrats that that President Bush inherited all of this surplus, and it was somehow because, I guess, President Clinton had done something right. But in fact, those years, Republicans controlled the House, and they forced President Clinton to balance the budget. And that's why he got a surplus, is because you guys made him have a surplus. Did I understand that correctly?
You do, and congressional Democrats voted against the balanced budget agreement. So that's the first part of the equation. Second one is, President Obama did inherit a big deficit, but he inherited from congressional Democrats who held power for the last 2 years. They didn't even send President Bush a budget because they knew he would spend less. And so my point of that is that you can't take credit for a surplus you didn't create and avoid blame for a deficit you did. That's one of the big, I think, misperceptions, the big lies in Washington, D.C. I agree with other conservatives that Republicans, I think, got fired because we didn't control spending well enough. Even though we'd whittled that deficit down and we're learning from those mistakes, that deficit now is 10 times greater, and we are in a mess we may never recover from. I yield back.
Great, yeah. Gentlemen, you just said that you're talking about a deficit. Was it $2.1 trillion just for the next 2 years? Did I hear you correctly?
Almost $2 trillion just for this year. In the
$2 trillion for this year.